Hello and welcome to another edition of AI in the Classroom Daily. I'm Dan Cogan-Drew, and this is a podcast helping educators make sense of AI without the hype. Full transparency, I use AI as a thinking partner as I prepare each of these episodes because I think the best way to talk honestly about AI in education is to work with it openly. So we have two stories on the docket for today's episode. One is a story from Fortune magazine, which is a commentary piece, and it reports that Gen Z workers are turning to ChatGPT to rehearse salary negotiations and difficult workplace conversations. And the author, who, to be clear, is the CEO of an AI corporate training company, and so has a vested stake in this, is framing the use of GPT in this way as a breakthrough, a practice gym for interpersonal fluency, which is now finally available to everyone. And story two, which I think makes for an interesting contrast here, is about the sport of ultimate Frisbee, a sport that was born 50 years ago in the town that I happen to live in, Maplewood, New Jersey, and has been developing steadily since then. Millions of people now around the world play it. And what's interesting about it is that it's not about AI. It's operating without referees. And the rules of the game explicitly state that players are expected to work out disagreements on the field in real time. And the principle behind this is called spirit of the game. Every team has a spirit captain. And when something goes wrong, players may call a spirit timeout and they might talk it through and then keep playing. And so I don't want to say which approach is better here, but I want to use the contrast between these two, the idea of using GPT as an AI rehearsal mechanism that's now widely available versus the kind of player-mediated refereeing, self-correcting system in Ultimate Frisbee. I want to use those two to talk a little bit about school design. So first off, I will say that I think that the Fortune piece names a real problem. The idea that Gen Z lacks fluency in real-time conflict resolution, in part because of remote work, in part because of asynchronous communication. All of these are contributing factors. But I want to name that the conditions didn't really start at work. They're starting in classrooms and schools where there isn't space for structured disagreement, civil pushback, and face-to-face persuasion because they're rarely designed into the learning experience. So AI arrives into that situation and it enables the participants to simulate those hard conversations. It's filling a gap, and that's a gap that appeared in school, was probably not resolved in school, and continued afterwards. And so what I want to pose here is the question that educators need to ask is not, should we use AI for this, but why does this gap exist and what can we do about it in the places where we're already working with students, namely school? And I include with that extracurricular activities like sports and such. So let's take a look at Ultimate Frisbee for a moment. What's remarkable here is not that the players of Ultimate Frisbee are more mature or more civic. It's that the sports architecture, the way the game is designed, requires hard conversations. There's no referee that players can turn to when there's a conflict. There's no adult that they can defer responsibility or accountability to. The spirit captain isn't optional. It's a structural part of the game. Now, you might think that Ultimate seems like some weird hippy-dippy sport that's only played with dogs or on the beach, but this dynamic in self-policing and self-correcting systems is not exclusive to Ultimate Frisbee. If you think about the pickup basketball game, it also has no referees, there's no scoreboard operator, and there's no one mediating the foul calls. Players are making those calls on each other, and they have to negotiate what's fair, and they have to do it in real time, and then they have to do it with people that they want to keep playing with, because the goal, of course, is not to sit around arguing, it's to play. Now, that system isn't perfect, but it's been producing the kind of repetition in civil disagreement on courts, on fields, on driveways for generations. It's something we're very familiar with. But we've stripped that out of so many other parts of young people's lives. And then we're wondering why we have this gap when they enter the workforce and they're experiencing these challenges with hard conversations. So I want to think about what this means for learning design and to say that the difficult conversations that we're talking about here aren't a separate skill that you then learn and apply to the game. That's the game itself. That's part and parcel because that's what the conditions demand. Now, if you think about that in the context of most days in school, where are students actually required to disagree with a peer in real time with real stakes and then keep working forward together. It doesn't happen very often. This isn't a common experience for most students, and therefore they're not developing the kinds of habits and routines and kind of muscle memory that would come from this kind of an experience. So we go back to episode 11, we talked about a soccer coach who's structuring practice to simulate game conditions. They understand their job is to stay on the sideline because they know that the game doesn't directly involve them. Ultimate Frisbee's spirit of the game takes that a step further, where the referee is not even present. The players are their own referee, and that's a much richer learning condition. And the same can be said of pickup basketball. Now, it's true that AI role play can lower the floor on anxiety, and that can have real value for someone who is anxious about having a hard conversation. They don't know where to begin, and a low stakes simulation might help them get started. But fluency isn't built by talking to someone or something that can't actually be hurt by what you say, can't misread the room, can't have a bad day. It requires real stakes. And you have to be planning backwards from the game if you're going to have an effective practice, or you're going to use this gym analogy. So I don't think the question here is whether to use the AI conversation tools if you're a classroom teacher. It's really think about whether your classroom already has the conditions where students are practicing that real-time disagreement. If you don't have those conditions and you're looking to incorporate an AI tool, you may be out in front of what your students are ready for. And I would say for instructional coaches and administrators, think about the spirit of the game as a policy decision. It's not that the Ultimate Frisbee got more civil because they found more civil teenagers. It's that the sport designs civility into the rules. And that's something that schools can do and are currently doing with things like restorative circles, structured academic controversy, Socratic seminar. These are things that we see in many of the schools that we visit. They're the architecture. And I think the question is whether the school treats them that way or whether they're designed to operate at the margins or perhaps only in extracurricular settings. So a couple practical takeaways here. So one, as you're working in your school, think about one place in the week where students are required to hold a real-time disagreement and then keep working together afterwards. It's not a debate where someone wins, and it's not a discussion where everyone shares and moves on. It's actually a negotiation. If there isn't such a space, you might want to think about figuring out a way to create one so that students have a place to actually begin to learn and practice these skills. If the district, at the leadership level, if the district is considering AI conversation practice tools, and they're coming, they're definitely just over the horizon, the question I don't think should be, does it work? But is really, what is the teacher's role with regard to what the AI is observing? And then very concretely, what's the real world practice that it's preparing the students for in this game analogy? What's the game? I'll give you one last caution to think about, is that the spirit of the game that we've been talking about and I'm a fan of can break down. And the Psychology Today piece is written by somebody who loves the sport, confess, as I do. And so it doesn't dwell on the moments when players don't handle the conflict well, when these spirit timeouts become confrontations, and when the system shows signs of failure. And I think this underscores that the design principle may be sound, but it really comes down to the hard work of execution. And so the theme to end on here is that learning requires conditions. It's not just about the tools or about the content, but the conditions. And the simplest condition that we can name here is that we're putting students in situations where the only way through is to talk to each other. That's the final thought for today. Thanks for joining, and we'll see you again next episode.